This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. On Wednesday, Danes went to the polls to decide whether or not Denmark should scrap its defence opt-out, one of the country's opt-outs from the European Union. Polling in the run-up to the election suggested that most Danes did indeed want to scrap the opt-out, and, well, that's exactly what happened. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the referendum results, what this means for the EU's defence policy, and how this will affect Danish-EU relations more generally. So before we get into the results, a bit of background. Denmark has always been one of the more hesitant members of the EU, having negotiated various opt-outs throughout the years. The first one became apparent when Danish voters narrowly rejected the Treaty of the European Union, commonly known as the Maastricht Treaty, in a referendum in June 1992. This was actually the first time that a European electorate have rejected a European Community or Union treaty, with the debatable exception of the 1972 Norwegian EC accession referendum. Anyway, the Danish result, and the narrow margin of victory that Maastricht got in France that same year, made European governments increasingly wary about putting new treaty proposals up for public referendums. John Major, for example, ignored a motion by Conservative peers suggesting that he put Maastricht up to a referendum, and 6 other countries, including Denmark, cancelled referendums on the EU's constitutional treaty in 2005, which was later repackaged as the Lisbon Treaty and ratified by national governments, not local electorates. Anyway, after the Danish public rejected Maastricht, a scramble to save the European project ensued, resulting in the 1992 Edinburgh Agreement. The Edinburgh Agreement provided Denmark with 4 opt-outs. The first allows the Danes to keep the Danish kroner instead of the euro. The second allows the Danes to opt out of the EU's common security and defence policies, which basically means any EU-wide military activity. The third provides an exemption from any EU justice or home affairs laws, which includes stuff like divorce, bankruptcy, and asylum law. The fourth originally allowed Danes to keep their Danish citizenship instead of purely receiving EU citizenship. But this became irrelevant with the adoption of the 1997 Amsterdam Treaty, which made EU citizenship supplementary, effectively nullifying Denmark's opt-out. Anyway, this new treaty, including all 4 opt-outs, was put to the Danish public in a referendum in 1993 and was subsequently approved by 56.7% of voters, with an 86.5% turnout. Anyway, over the years, Denmark has occasionally wavered on its opt-outs. In 2000, the Social Democrat-led government called a referendum on the potential of scrapping the currency opt-out and letting the country join the Eurozone. At the time, the 3 largest parties, the ruling Social Democrats, and the 2 largest opposition parties, the Danish Liberals and the Conservatives, all supported joining the euro, and polling 3 months before the election gave the pro-euro yes vote a 10-point lead over the pro-kroner no vote. However, in the months leading up to the referendum, public sentiment swung against the euro, in part due to the fact that the euro fell 15% against the dollar in this time frame. But it was also because of general antipathy towards the incumbent government, which had been in power for 8 years and would be swept out of power the following autumn. In the end, the proposal was rejected by 53.2% of voters, with a turnout of 87.6%, and the Danes kept the kroner, a currency they still use today. Then, in 2007, the Liberal-Conservative coalition promised more referendums on opt-outs, but these were put on hold due to controversies surrounding the ratification of the Constitution and the Lisbon treaties. Then, in 2011, a new Social Democrat-led coalition promised referendums on the opt-outs once again, but again they were abandoned in the wake of the Eurozone debt crisis. Then, in 2014, the government made a deal with the opposition on a referendum on the Home and Justice Matters opt-out, motivated by concerns that the opt-out would force Denmark into leaving Europol. The referendum on modifying the opt-out was eventually held in December 2015, when, despite the support of the three main parties, it was rejected by 53% of voters on a 72% turnout, leading Denmark out of Europol. So you probably get the idea by this point. Since negotiating their opt-outs in the 90s, successive Danish governments have flirted with the idea of scrapping them. But the Danish political establishment have so far struggled to actually convince the Danish public. Apparently undeterred by their track record, on March 6th, the three main parties, supported by the Social Liberal Party and the historically Eurosceptic Green Left Party, announced that they'd be holding a referendum on June 1st on scrapping the Common Security and Defence opt-out, where all of those parties will be campaigning for yes, i.e. campaigning to scrap the opt-out. On the very same day, Denmark also announced that it will be increasing its defence budget from 1.5% of GDP to the NATO target of 2% by 2033. By the way, Denmark, for those of you who don't know, is actually a founding member of NATO, although it did maintain some exemptions to avoid upsetting the Soviet Union, including a ban on permanent NATO bases and nuclear deployments on their territory. It was clear then, with both of these announcements being made on the same day, that this was in part a response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which had reinvigorated European defence policy across the board. While Denmark doesn't actually border Russia, it's pretty close to Kaliningrad, and it does control access between the Baltic and North Sea via the Danish Straits, which means that it will be heavily involved in any European conflict with Russia. Regardless, in polling leading up to the referendum, yes had a steady lead over no. That margin narrowed somewhat in early April, but widened significantly in May, after the Danish foreign minister made clear that scrapping the opt-out wouldn't necessarily entail Danish accession into a future European army, as this would require further treaty amendments, which would also need to be put before the Danish people for approval in yet another separate referendum. Anyway, polling taken in the days before the referendum gave yes a 20-point lead over no. So it didn't come as much of a surprise when it was announced that the Danes had indeed voted to scrap their opt-out. So what does this mean for Denmark? Well, NATO will continue to be Denmark's primary defence alliance, but scrapping the EU's defence opt-out will give the Danes more influence in forming EU defence policy going forward, and will make them even more likely to get involved in any defence activities. That's also good news for the EU, or at least those EU politicians who want an independent European defence policy, most notably Emmanuel Macron. The fact that the Danes, who are usually pretty hesitant when it comes to Europe-related referenda, are actually keen on an independent European defence policy suggests that the war in Ukraine has actually created a rare sense of enthusiasm across the continent, and it's a clear step towards Macron's dream of strategic autonomy. And if you want more autonomy and control in your life, then you should check out Brilliant. Brilliant is an online STEM learning platform that teaches you everything you need to know to better understand the modern world. Baffled by investment and finance? Well, they've got courses on maths and quantitative finance. Confused by coding? Well, they've got everything from the very basics right through to quantum computing. Unclear why you're losing millions? Well, there's no guarantee that Brilliant can help with that, but they do have courses on cryptocurrency and gambling. You get the point. Everything you want to learn about STEM is covered by Brilliant. And the best thing is that all of their courses are designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning. So you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you can sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDR EU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for supporting the channel.